I had just moved across the country from Virginia to Southern California and was looking for some new furniture for my apartment. I first shopped local thrift shops, but couldn't find anything that suited my needs. I then went on to Facebook Marketplace to search for a couch that I could put in front of my TV. My current setup had the TV sitting on the ground and a normal dining room table chair in front of it. It was a miserable setup, I know, so when I found a couch on Marketplace in good condition for free, I was stoked. I messaged the guy to see if it was available, and he responded back almost instantly. He told me it was available, but it was first come, first serve, so I asked for his address despite it being almost 10 p.m. I grabbed my keys, got in my truck, and headed his way. His house was about 20 minutes from mine, so I kinda sped and did some risky maneuvers because I didn't want to miss out on the couch. I pull up to his house, and the guy is sitting in his driveway drinking a beer while sitting on the couch. I thought it was a little odd, but in all honesty, this city was filled with people that would sit on their porch and just drink all day and night. I got out of my truck and walked up the driveway to introduce myself. We chatted for a bit, and he seemed like a pretty friendly guy. He was your classic country boy with a thick southern accent. He offered me a beer, to which I'd normally say no, but after all the stress from moving, I let the temptation get to me, and I accepted. We both sat down on the couch and continued chatting. I was there for a total of 20 minutes, and I'm not kidding, in those 20 minutes this guy drank about 5 beers. He was practically chugging them. He was obviously intoxicated at this point. I stood up and stretched and told him I better get going and asked if he could help me load the couch into my truck. He agreed, and when he began lifting the side of the couch, he threw up all over the armrest and cushion. I dropped the couch in disgust and backed away a little. He began picking it up again and said, "Come on, let's get it in the truck." I said to him, "You just threw up all over it, why would I want it now?" Looking back, I could have used a more calm tone, but I was pissed. It was a perfect couch, and now it was ruined. He dropped his end of the couch and looked at me with an angry face. He said, "You're taking the couch, bud. I even gave you free beer. Now get in your truck and get the hell out of here." I knew at this point it was time for me to leave, so I started walking towards my truck. He started cussing at me and even threw his empty beer bottle at me. Luckily, he didn't hit me with it, but it flew past my head and hit the side of my truck. I didn't have time to see the damage because I was too focused on getting in my truck away from this drunken maniac. As I'm getting in, I could see him absolutely manhandling the couch and trying to bring it over to my truck. I start the engine and put it in drive, but not before he gets about half the couch in my truck bed. I speed off, and luckily, the couch was unbalanced and fell back on the street. I could see him in the rearview mirror, still visibly angry. I know this isn't the scariest story, but the things people do when they're drunk can get out of hand real quick. I just hope that guy gets the help he needs. I was looking for a new motorcycle on Facebook Marketplace and found a really clean bike for a good price. I messaged a guy and he told me the bike was over at his friend's place, but he could meet me in about an hour. I agreed, and to make the time pass a little quicker, I decided to head to the bank to get the cash. An hour passed, and he told me he couldn't make it down to his friend Mike's house because the ride he was relying on bailed on him. I was upset and felt like this whole thing was just a waste of time, but decided to just go to Mike's house and knock on the door. I get to his house and knock on the door. Keep in mind, this isn't the best place in town, and the front screen on the door was completely blacked out and I couldn't see anything past it. A man answered the door and I said, "Hey, is Mike here? Brandon sent me down to pick up his bike." He slammed the door and I just stood there for a couple of seconds. As I was walking away, I hear the door open again, and the man said, "Mike's not here right now, but he should be back in about an hour." I told the guy thanks and walked back to my truck. I text Brandon and tell him the situation. At this point, I was pissed that I was dealing with all the classic Facebook Marketplace shenanigans and just wanted to get the bike so I could move on with my day. I don't know why, but I guess I was feeling desperate. So I offered Brandon a ride back down to Mike's house. He lived about 20 minutes away, which wasn't too bad. I arrived at Brandon's location, and I'm confused because the address he gave me was for some sort of rehab center. I messaged Brandon if this was the right place, and he said yes, I'll be right out. At this point, I was a little sketched out, but in all honesty, it was broad daylight, so what could go wrong? A couple minutes later, Brandon gets in my truck, and we immediately get along and are cracking jokes. He seemed like a really nice guy, so I figured I'd ask him what he was doing at the rehab center. He told me he just got out of prison and was in there for multiple drug felonies and theft. Red flags started going off in my head, and at this point, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just pull over and tell him to get out of my truck, so I just continued driving, trying to keep it cool. After a couple minutes passed, I felt at peace again, because in all honesty, he was keeping it cool and wasn't causing any trouble. He was just chatting along and seemed to be in a good state of mind. This peace quickly faded away after he told me that his friend Mike is pending a trial for stabbing someone in his driveway just last week. So at this point, I have a felon in my truck, and we're about to roll up to Mike's house where he literally stabbed someone a week ago. I truly didn't know what to do at this point. We started to approach Mike's house, but surprisingly, Brandon told me to stop a little ways down the street because he wanted to have the cops come up there so there wasn't any trouble. We waited in the truck for about 10 minutes, waiting for them to show up, but they never came. Brandon told me just pull up to Mike's house and he'll handle it. We both get out of the truck, and I follow Brandon from a pretty good distance, getting ready to book it if anything sketchy went down. Brandon peeks under the garage door and spots Mike. Brandon says, "Where's my bike?" And Mike replied, "What bike are you talking about? I left that thing outside weeks ago." They started getting in a heated argument, and I just backed away. Brandon was fuming at this point and backed off too. He said to me, "Let's get out of here. Before I go back to prison, I'm done with this tweaker." We both got in the truck, and as we were leaving, Mike ran up to the truck and was banging on the passenger window. Luckily, the door was locked, so he couldn't get in. I drove Brandon back to the rehab center while listening to all his crazy prison stories. Let me tell you, all those conspiracies about prison that you hear are unfortunately true. There's some pretty crazy stuff that goes on in there that you would never think is real. I dropped him off, and that was that. I was pretty disappointed that the bike wasn't there, but I was just glad I didn't get into any kind of trouble or get hurt. I had my guitar listed on Facebook Marketplace for a couple weeks and was starting to get desperate for cash. I had a legit person contact me, wanting to buy it, and not one of those fake accounts offering Zelle. We agreed to meet at a local Denny's to do the deal around 5 o'clock that night. I pull up and message the guy, letting him know I'm there and what car I was driving. It took him about 10 minutes to respond, which was annoying to say the least. He said he was on the other side of the building, parked in a van. So I start my car and start to drive over. I see a van parked on the back side of the building with a dim light on inside. I message the guy and say, "Hey, I'm parked right in front of you. The guitar's in my trunk if you want to come check it out." He replied and said, "Bring it over here. I have a bad back and can't walk that far." I sat there thinking how dumb and sketchy this felt, but I really needed the cash. I decided to drive up to the van and roll down my window. I honked my horn and waited for him to roll down his. I asked if this was close enough for him to walk now. He told me in a raspy voice, "Pull up a little more to the back of my van and I'll meet you there." I agreed, but as I was pulling up, I could see two men in the back of his van wearing all black. I rolled up my window and sped off. Not sure if I just avoided getting robbed or something worse, but luckily, a couple of days later, I ended up selling my guitar to my friend.